Now I am going to introduce myself. I am Sri Durjodhan State Odisha. I am going to teach all of you, my friends and dear students, an interesting prose piece called The Portrait of a Lady by Khushwant Singh. Introduction of the author. K.S. was born on 20 February 1950, is a prominent Indian English writer and journalist. His weekly column, with malice towards one and all, carried by several Indian newspapers, is among the most widely read columns. He is well known in Indian literary history as one of the finest historians and novelists, a forthright political commentator, an outstanding observer and a critic of social life. Unit 1, warm up. Do you enjoy your grandparents' company? Are they good companions? Children grow up with a typical image of their grandparents in their minds. Another thought is almost revolting to them. Read the following unit of the text carefully and note how the writer portrays his grandmother. Text. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she followed to tell us. In other words, the author wants to say that his grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the last 20 years. And that the author came to know her and knew that. People said that she had been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was not believed by any other else. His grandfather's portrait or image was hanging over the mantelpiece in the drawing room. His grandparents wore a big turban on the head and loose-fitting clothes on the body. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. This was not believed by any people. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for his grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was actually revolting. She often told the small children of the games she used to play when she was a child during her childhood age. That seemed quite absurd and undignified of them treated it like the fables of the prophets he used to tell us then. She had more କହିବାର ଅର୍ଥ ଏହି ଯେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଲେଖକ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲେ ଯେ ତାଙ୍କର ବୃଦ୍ଧା ଆଈ ବା ଆଈ ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କର ଭଳିଆ ବୃଦ୍ଧା ହୋଇଯାଇଥିଲେ, ସେହି ଆଈମାନଙ୍କର ବା ବୃଦ୍ଧା ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିଙ୍କର ଏତେ ପୁରୁଣା ହୋଇଯାଇଥିଲେ ବା ଏତେ ବୟସ୍କା ହୋଇଯାଇଥିଲେ ଯେ ତାଙ୍କର ଶରୀରର ଚମଡ଼ା ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ସଙ୍କୁଚିତ ହୋଇଯାଇଥିଲା ଏବଂ ସେ 20 ବର୍ଷ ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଯେଭଳିଆ ଦେଖାଯାଉଥିଲେ ଏବେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସେଭଳିଆ ସେ ଦେଖାଯାଉଛନ୍ତି। ଲୋକଙ୍କ କହିବା ଅନୁସାରେ ସେ ଏକଦା ବହୁତ ସୁନ୍ଦର ଥିଲେ ଏବଂ ତାଙ୍କର କାଳେ ଜଣେ ସ୍ୱାମୀ ଥିଲା, କିନ୍ତୁ ତାହା କୌଣସି ଲୋକ ବିଶ୍ୱାସ କରିପାରୁ ନଥିଲେ। ତାଙ୍କର ତାଙ୍କର ଅଜାଙ୍କର ଗୋଟେ ଫଟୋଚିତ୍ର ବୈଠକ କୋଠରୀର ଥାକ ଉପରେ ଟଙ୍ଗା ହେଇଥିଲା। ସେ ଗୋଟେ ମୁଣ୍ଡରେ ବିରାଟ ଟୋପି ପିନ୍ଧୁଥିଲେ ଏବଂ ତାଙ୍କର ଶରୀରରେ ସେ ଢିଲା କପଡ଼ା ପିନ୍ଧୁଥିଲେ। ତାଙ୍କର ଲମ୍ବା ଧଳା ଦାଢ଼ି ତାଙ୍କର ଛାତିର ଅନେକାଂଶ ଆବୃତ କରିଥିଲା ଏବଂ ସେ ଦେଖିବାକୁ 100 ବର୍ଷରୁ ଉର୍ଦ୍ଧ୍ୱ ଜଣା ପଡ଼ୁଥିଲା। ସେ ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କ ଭଳିଆ ତାଙ୍କର ମଧ୍ୟ ଗୋଟେ ସ୍ତ୍ରୀ ବା ଅନେକ ଛୁଆ ଥିଲେ। ସେ ତାଙ୍କର ଅନେକ ନାତି ନାତୁଣୀ ମାନେ ଥିଲେ। ସେ ଏକଦା ବହୁତ ସୁନ୍ଦରୀ ଥିଲେ ଏବଂ ସେଟା ବିରୁଦ୍ଧାତ୍ମକ ଥିଲା। ସେ ଏଭଳିଆ ଖେଳ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ଖେଳୁଥିଲେ ଯେଉଁ ଖେଳ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ତାଙ୍କର ବାଲ୍ୟ କାଳରେ ସେ ଖେଳୁଥିଲେ। ସେଟା ଅସମ୍ମାନଜନକ ଥିଲା ଏବଂ ସେ ପ୍ରଫେଟ ମାନଙ୍କର କାହାଣୀ ଭଳିଆ ଜଣା ପଡ଼ୁଥିଲେ। She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older, and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hovered about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in unaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. In other words, when the grandmother of the author was old, she was short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was covered with many wrinkles, going from everywhere to everywhere. Anyway, she was terribly beautiful, and she became so old that she could not become older than that. She was both pretty and beautiful when she was old. She was walking very slowly in the house on the floor in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Her silver locks or hair were scattered untidily and unbeautifully over the pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in unaudible prayer. Still then, she was very beautiful, pretty. She was like the landscape of winter season on the mountains and hills, an expanse of pure white serenities, breathing peace and contentment. मोर कहबार अर्थ यही से जेतुले वृद्धा थिले से गेड़ा तथा मोटा थिले तांको अंटा टिके आग को झुंकी जाउतला तांकर मुहरे अनेक संकुचित चमड़ा थिला से एते वृद्धा हो जाइथिले जे आउ से एणु एणिकी वृद्धा हो पारिबे नाही से घर भितर धीरे धीरे जाहाज करथिले एवं से जेतले जाहाज करथिले तांकर गोटे हाथटा तांकर अंटारे निर्भर करुथला एवं से समय तांकर तुलसी माला को जप करुथिले बा जपुथिले तांकर धड़ा बाड़ा गुड़िक तांकर मुहरे बिछे हो जाउथला तांकर ओठटा सदा सर्वदा अस्पष्ट भाव भगवान को प्रार्थना करथिले जहाँ भी हो से भारी सुंदरी थिले शीत दिनर सुंदर दृश्य भड़िया से पर्वत शिखर जना पड़ुथिले एवं से शांति तथा संतोषजनक भाव देखा जाउथिले। यूनिट सेकंड वार्म अप mothers are generally affectionate, protective and caring. Read the following of the text and note how the winter writer's grandmother looked after him in their village during his childhood. Text. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen inkpot and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. In other words, I mean to say that when the grandmother of the author was old, both of them developed a good friendship between them. The parents of the author left the house forever and went to live in a nearby city. And all the members lived there except the author and his grandmother. The grandmother used to wake the author up in the morning and get him ready for school. She was telling morning prayer to God in a dull, monotonous way while she bathed and dressed him in the hope that he would listen and get to know by heart. The author listened carefully because he loved her voice, sweet voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch his wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen inkpot, and a real pen, tie them all in a bundle, and hand it to him. After taking breakfast of a thick stale chapatis with a little butter on it, both of them went to school. The grandmother of the author carried several stale chapatis which with her for the village dogs of the village. मोर कहबार अर्थ है जितेबले लेखकंकर आई वृद्धा हो जाते उभय भितर गोटे बंधुत्व सृष्टि होता माँ बापा पाख सहर को गले बसवास कले किंतु लेखक एवं तांकर आई सेठाको से माने गले नहीं। प्रत्येक दिन सकाळू तांकर आई तांको उठाउथिले एवं स्कूल जीवा पे प्रस्तुति करुथिले। से जितेबले उठाउथिले तापरे से गीत गाउथिले भगवान को प्रार्थना करुथिले एवं सेटा लेखक शुणुथिले किंतु मन भितर सबुदिन सकाशे मन करू नथिले। तापरे तांकर आई गोटे काठ निर्मित स्लेट बा सिलेट आणुथिले ताको भल भाव धोई दउथिले एवं हलदिया चौक एवं छोट माटी निर्मित सही बोतल एवं गोटे कलम को गोटे बंडल हिसाब से बांधि दउथिले एवं तांको दउथिले। जलखिया सकाळे खाई सारी से माने किछिटा चापती बा रुटी बासी रुटी धरिथिले एवं से बासी रुटी को समस्त गाँर कुकुर मान से बांटी दौथिले। My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabets and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. My grandmother and inside reading the scripture. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the village temple door. They followed us our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. I mean to say that when the grandmother of the author went to school, both of them were going to school, and the school was very close to the temple of the village. The priest of the temple would taught them alphabet and morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on the veranda of the temple, and the small children were reading the scripture like the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Gita, etc. When both of them finished, both of them would return home, and while returning home, both of them distributed the dogs of the village, and at that time all the dogs were growling and fighting with each other for the eating of the bread. मोर कहबार अर्थ है जे जेतेबेले लेखकंकर आई स्कूल को जाउथिले तांको मते नै जाउथिले अर्थात लेखकंको मते नै जाउथिले एवं स्कूलटा मंदिर अति पाखरे थिला से मंदिर पूजक बा पुजारी तांको विभिन्न प्रकार अक्षर और क्ष पर्यंत शिखाउथिला से समय तांकर आई भगवान को प्रार्थना करथिले एवं से समय तांकर आई गंभीरा भितरे बसी भगवान को प्रार्थना करथिले ता परे परे से विभिन्न प्रकार रामायण महाभारत गीता ग्रंथ गुड़ी को से आवृत्ति करथिले बा पढ़ुथिले जेतेबेले उभय समस्त जिनिस शेष कर दउथिले तापर से माने घर को फेरुथिले फेरिला समय उभय कुकुर मानकु बासी रुटी दउथिले से समय कुकुर माने ताकू खाइबा पाए ताकर भितरे संग्राम करथिले बा कलिकुजिया करथिले। यूनिट 3 Life in the village is quite different from city life. Family relationship also changes. Identities are modified. There is a turning point in relationship. Read the following text and note how a turning point occurs in the writer's relationship with his grandmother. Text. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets and she took to the feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. So, when the parents of the author went to a nearby city to live there, they sent a news to both grandmother and the author, and after that both of them went to the city to live with the parents of the author, and it was a great turning point in between the friendship of grandmother and the author. Although both of them living in a small room of the city, still then there was not good relationship between the author and the grandmother. The author was going to an English medium school in a bus. There were no dogs in the village to eat the stale chapatis and took to feeding sparrows. She took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of their house. मोर कहबार अर्थ है जेतेबेले लेखक माँ बापा पाख सहर को गले से माने से गोटे नुआ घर भड़ा नहीं से रहिले तापरे किछि दिन परे उभय लेखक एवं तांकर आई से भड़ा घर को गले से माने समस्त गोटे भड़ा घरे रहिले। लेखक प्रत्येक दिन सकाळू गोटे इंग्लिश मीडियम स्कूल को जाउथले एवं से गोटे बस रे जाउथले। से समय से गाँव रे जमती कुकुर मान को देखुले बा चौपती बा रुटी दउथले से भलिया देखा मिलला नहीं। केवल लेखकंकर आई चुटिया मान को खाद्य जोगाउथिले। As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher taught in school. Though I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and Scripture. One day I announced that we were being given music lesson. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lived association. It was the monopoly of the harlots and beggars and not meant for gentle folk. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. I mean to say that after some years, both of them saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake him up and get him ready for school. When the author came back, she would ask him what the teacher had taught me. The author would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity of Isaac Newton, Archimedes principle, the world being round. Actually, this thing made her unhappy and sorrow. His grandmother could not help him with his lesson because she was uneducated. On the other hand, she did not believe in the things that the teachers taught at the English medium school, and she was very much sad that there was no learning about God, Scripture, and anything else. One day, the author announced that they were being given music lesson and music learning. She was very disturbed and became very sad. According to her, music had not good relationship with this. It was the monopoly or it was the work of the harlots and beggars and not the good people of aristocracy families. The grandmother of the author did not talk with the author. She became silent always, and it was meant that this was disapproval. She rarely talked to him after that. मोर कहबार अर्थ है जेतबेले वर्ष गुड़ाक गड़ीगला उभय कम देखा देखी हेले किछि समय पर्यंत तांकर आई तांको उठाउथिले सकाळो स्कूल को जीवा पाई जेतबेले लेखक फेरुथिले तांकर आई पचारुथिले जे शिक्षक माने तांको कोन पढ़ाइले से कहते शिक्षक मैंने आमको इंग्लिश पढ़ाऊले पाश्चात्य देशर विज्ञान एवं ज्ञान पढ़ाऊले यथा माध्याकर्षण शक्तिर नियम आर्कमेडिक्सर नीति गुड़िक एवं पृथ्वी केमती गोल अटे एवं से जो शुणुले से भारी दुखित अनुभव करते जहाँ भी हो से कौन से प्रकार रे लेखकों को शिक्षा रे साहाय्य कर पारो नथिले। एवं यार कारण होची जे तांकर अनुसार भगवानकर कथा किछि पढ़ाउ नथिला कौन सी ग्रंथ बा पुराण मानकर कथा पढ़ाउ नथिला। दिने लेखक कहले जे तांको काले संगीत बा वाद्य विषय पढ़ा जाउची से भारी विरक्त हेले एवं दुख प्रकाश अनुभव कले। तांको अनुसार एटा वेश्यावृत्ति अटे बा भिखारी मानकर वृत्ति अटे। यह कौन सम्भ्रांत वंशर परिवार वर्गर सदस्य माने भलिया पढ़ती नहीं, जहा फल से सदा सर्वदा नीरव रोते एवं लेखकों सहित से कम कथबार्ता कले। When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirruping. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. I mean to say that when the author went to a university, there he was given a separate room, and the good friendship between the author and his grandmother was not as before. His grandmother lived always in loneliness. She always present nearby her spinning wheel and never talked to anybody else. From morning till evening, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting the prayers to God. After only in the day, she giving sparrows to eat. She was sitting in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits or pieces. By that time, hundreds and thousands of little birds of sparrows were collected, and some of them sat on her legs, some of them sat on her shoulders, some of them sat on her head. When the birds were sitting on her head or legs, at that time she smiled but never drove them away. It was the happiest time on her on her part of the day, and she became very glad. Unit 4, warm up. You are already acquainted with the first three phases of the author's relationship with grandmother. In the first phase, the grandmother looked after the author in the village, and she was physically very close to her. In the second phase, he was estranged from her when she went to city school. In the third phase, the common link of friendship between them snapped when he went to university. Finally, when he went abroad for further studies, the last sign of the physical contact between them was lost. Read the concluding part of the text and note how the final curtain falls in the grandmother's life. Text. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell, but my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer, her mind was lost in prayer, her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently she kissed my forehead, and I left. When I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. In other words, there was not good relation between the grandmother and the author. The author wanted to go to abroad for higher education. The grandmother became very upset and unhappy. The author would be away for 5 years, and at her age one could not tell anything else. But the grandmother of the author could tell what will happen by that time. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave him to the railway station but did not talk to the author anymore. She was always busy in telling or in counting the beads of her rosary. Silently she kissed him on his forehead, and when the author left, he cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between them. That means when the author went to foreign countries for higher education, he was sure his grandmother would be upset and unhappy, and he thought that for 5 years they would not meet each other, and his grandmother was not sentimental or emotional by that time. She went to the railway station to see him off, but when they reached railway station, both of them did not talk to each other. Only her lips moved in the prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer of God, for God. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Slowly she kissed on the forehead of the author, and when the author left the railway station, he cherished and remembered the moist imprint or sign on her forehead, and this was the last physical contact between them. लेखक जेतेबेले विदेश यात्रा कले उच्च शिक्षा ग्रहण करवा सकाशे से समय तांकर आई दुखित अनुभव कले, कारण से जानिबा को पाइले उभय 5 वर्ष पर्यंत आ देखा साक्षात हो पारे नहीं। जहाँ भी हो लेखकंकर आई बहुत दुखित अनुभव कले एवं भावप्रवण हेले। उभय जिते रेलवे स्टेशन को गले तांकर भितर कौन कथबार्ता हो नथिला। तांकर ओठ गुड़ाक भगवान को प्रार्थना करिबारे व्यस्त थिला। तांकर आंगुठी गुड़ाक केवल तुलसी माला जपुले। धीरे धीरे से अर्थात तांकर आई तांकर कपाल रे गोटे चुम्बन आंकीदेले एवं से जितेबाला रेलवे स्टेशन रू चलीगले से सबुदिन सकाशे तांकर मुंडरे थिबा से चिन्ह बा चुंबनर चिन्ह को मन रखुले। But that was not so. After 5 years I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look at a day older. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayer. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. In other words, there was no friendship between them for the long 5 years. When both of them went to railway station, they did not look, when the author came to railway station, both of them did not talk to each other, and till that time she was not a older for a day. She embraced him and she was reciting the beads of her rosary and she was praying to God. Even on the first day of his arrival, her happiest moments were with the sparrows whom she fed food, and this was the happiest hour on the part of the grandmother. दीर्घ 5 वर्ष पर्यंत तांकर भितर कौनसी बंधुत्व रहिला नहीं. लेखक जिते घर को आसिले पुणी तांकर भितर रेलवे स्टेशन देखा साक्षात है. से सेतबेले गोटे दिन पाई मध्य दुर्बल बा वृथा जना पड़ू नथिले. तांको भितर कम कथबार्ता है. से तांको आलिंगन कले एवं लेखकंकर आई भगवान को सब प्रार्थना करथिले एवं तुलसी माला जपुथिले. तापर से माने उभय जिते घर को आसिले तांकर आई चोटिया मान को खाद्य जोगाइले एवं एटा तांको पई सबुठार अत्यंत सुखमय थिला बा खुशीर समय थिला. इन द इवनिंग ए चेंज केम ओवर her. She did not stray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing. For several hours she thumped as the sagging skin of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. That means in the very evening of that day, there was a great change in the mind of the grandmother. She no longer prayed to God. She collected nearby women of the houses, collected an old drum and started singing. For several hours she started singing and drumming the drum. She was singing like some of the soldiers were coming from the battlefield. All the members of the family persuaded her, placated her not to take any sort of overstraining, but she did not mind it and she only prayed to God and started singing and drumming the drum. मोर कहबार अर्थ जे सेई संध्यारे सेई दिनर संध्यारे गोटे विराट परिवर्तन हैला. तांकर आई आउ प्रार्थना भगवान को कले नहीं. से पाखर स्त्री मान को संग्रह कले, गोटे पुराना ड्रम वाद्य पाख को आणिले, से गीत गाइले एवं ताको बजाइले. ଏବଂ ସେ ବାଜାଟା ଏଭଳିଆ ଦେଖାଯାଉଥିଲା, ଜଣାପଡ଼ୁଥିଲା ଯେ ସତ ଯେପରିକି କେତେକ ସୈନ୍ୟମାନେ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରୁ ଫେରୁଛନ୍ତି ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ସାରିଲା ପରେ। ତାପରେ ପରିବାର ସମସ୍ତ ସଦସ୍ୟମାନେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଫୁସୁଲାଇଲେ ଯେ ସେ ଅର୍ଥାତ୍ ଲେଖକଙ୍କର ଆଈ ଯେମିତି କଷ୍ଟ ଆଉ ନିଅନ୍ତୁ ନାହିଁ। ସେ ଦିନଠାରୁ ସେ ଭଗବାନଙ୍କୁ ପ୍ରାର୍ଥନା କଲେ ନାହିଁ। The next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever and the doctor told us that it would go since only a few hours. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she bad omitted to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. I mean to say that on the very next day, she fell ill. It was a mild fever. The doctor said that this is very normal. But the grandmother of the author did not mind it any way. She rather thought it in a different way. She said that it was the end of her life. This was the last chapter of her life, and she did not do anybody else. मोर कहबार अर्थरे परवर्त दिनर सकाळे तांकर आई ज्वररे पड़िले, किंतु एटा गोटे सामान्य ज्वर थिला। डाक्तर कहले जे एटा स्वाभाविक कथा, किंतु तांकर आई अन्यत्र भाव से चिंतन कले। से कहले सेटा होछि तांकर जीवनर शेष समय, से आ बंची पारिबे नाही। तापरे से काहारी सहित मते कथावार्ता कले नाही। We protested, but she ignored our protest. She lay peacefully in bed praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and her rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face and we knew that she was dead. After some time it was known that all the members of the family protested, but she did not listen to anybody else. She lay peacefully in the bed from morning till night. She only told her beads of her rosary, and all the members of the family suspected that her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. It was like a peaceful pallor spread on her face, and all the members of the family found that she was dead and she would not live for longer. मोर कहबार अर्थ जे समस्त सदस्य माने परिवार सदस्य माने तांको मना कले से कौन प्रकार कष्ट स्वीकार करंतु नहीं। से किंतु काहारी कथा मानिले नहीं। से शांतिपूर्ण भाव में खटरे सकाळु संध्या पर्यंत पड़ी रहिले एवं भगवान को सब प्रार्थना कले एवं तुलसी माला को जपिले। समस्त सदस्य माने सन्देह कले जे आउ से कौन से भाव में बंची पारिबे नहीं। तेणुक से देखिले, समस्ते देखिले जे तांकर हाथरू केमती तुलसी माला तलक पड़ जाउछि। से समस्त अनुभव कले से आउ नाहांती, से सबुदिन सकाशे दुनिया चली जाइछंती। We lifted her off the bed and, as it is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. After a few hours of morning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In other words, all the members of the family took her to the burial ground, and it was the very custom and usage of that time. All of the members of the family covered her whole body with a cloth which was red in color. After lamenting for some time, they made some arrangement for the funeral ground. मोर कहबार अर्थ जे शेषरे लेखकर आई जेतले मरीगले से समस्ते तांको गोटे खटरे श्मशान को नहीं गले. श्मशान रे जेतले पहुँचले समस्ते गोटे लाल रंगर शाढ़ी तांको घोड़े देले. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped her halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff, wrapped in the red shroud. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs, the way by my grandmother always used to, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread when we carried my grandmother's corpse up. They flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. I mean to say that in the very evening, all the members of the family went to her room with a crowd stretcher to take her to the cremation ground. The sun was going to set in the west. All the rooms were lighted. The veranda was also lighted. All of them stopped halfway in the courtyard. All the members of the veranda, all the members of the family went to veranda, and where she was dead, all of them covered her body with a sari which was red in color. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no sound, there was no chirping, there was no twittering. So all of them felt sorry and unhappy for the birds, and the mother of the author brought some bread for the birds to eat, but no one took any sort of notice. In other words, all the birds did not look at it. Rather, all of them flew away, and next day the sweeper came and swept the bread crumbs into the dustbin. This is all for you. This lesson was closed with this. Thanking you all, my dear students and friends.